And he told me in my interview last week that the total combined gross domestic product of every country in the world, which is all the legitimate business in the world, has only generated $63 trillion. So $47 trillion is like over two-thirds of the entire combined GDP of the world being held against the U.S. Treasury.
Right.
Now, what does this mean? Does this mean the Treasury is going to pay $47 trillion? No, they don't have it at all. That's the whole point. Because they don't have it, they're going to be held accountable. It's one of these kind of deals where you're not going to hear anything about it except maybe from me and a few other folks. And then all of a sudden, one day, they're being held accountable. They're being dragged into court. Interpol is now working in the U.S. They've got men who are armed, who are guarding both sides of these transactions going on through the Federal Reserve. And then what happened was there was supposed to be a very substantial payment of this money that's now being looted out of the Rockefeller faction, who basically stole it from everybody else. I mean, looted is probably not the right word because they ripped it off in the first place. But there was supposed to be a very, very major financial transfer that was going to go into a lot of South American countries, of course, BRIC, Brazil. What's the biggest country in South America? Hello, there you go. Okay, so this is the other faction. This is the BRIC faction, the Russia, India, China, and Brazil faction. They're going to get their big payoff. You know, Robin Hood has kicked in. They're looting the Rockefellers. The money is being transferred to South America. And the stopover point that it was supposed to be transferred through was a little country just to the left of the Dominican Republic known as Haiti. And the day before the money was going to get wired through, isn't it so convenient that we have this biblical level earthquake in Haiti that destroys the ability for the money to get through the established pipeline to South America? Now, you don't even need exotic weapons technology. You don't need HARP. All you need, and I know it disturbs people to talk about this, but all you need is a miniature nuclear device that has a drill on it. And you drill this thing down into the crust, it goes down into the fault line, and then you set it off. And you get a big earthquake. You don't need any elaborate technology. That's what was done. That's what we heard from Fulford. Christopher Story's saying the same thing. I don't have any sources that have said anything about that one way or the other.
I think the president of Venezuela mentioned it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll have to send you a video I saw.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely do that. I mean, you know, in light of events like this, in light of the fact that these guys are basically trying to say, if you try to do this to us, we are going to hurt a whole hell of a lot of people. What would I be doing if I didn't talk about this? What would I be doing if I was just going to say, oh, you know, just meditate and be happy and trust that everything's going to go well? It is going to go well, and you should do that. And there's a wealth of spiritual information on my website, and if I write one article that doesn't sound the same as the others, it doesn't mean that I gave up my spiritual focus. But it does mean that you really ought to pay attention to what's going on, because these events affect you, they affect me, they affect our families. And one of the things that we're probably going to have to go through is a really upsetting economic upheaval for a little while once this happens. And I'm not being doom and gloom here. I'm being very pragmatic, because these guys are fighting dirty, they're fighting to the death, and they're not going to go down easily. And so they're probably going to try to do more of this kind of stuff like what happened with Haiti. We don't know how far it can go. It's interesting because if they do stuff that is in the U.S., it actually benefits Obama, whether you know he wanted it to happen or not, and I don't think he would. If something happens on your own soil, you have a teachable moment, and you can actually do more things because now you have the public's momentum behind you. So I don't really think the Rockefeller faction is going to attack the U.S. per se. That's why you see this thing happen in Haiti. It wasn't like the Oklahoma City bombing or something. You know, it was a much different situation. But look, at the end of the day, you're probably going to see this year a really horrific collapse. And here's the deal. I don't want you to freak out about it. You may find at some point that if you have stocks and so forth, that your stocks appear to be worthless. I'm not advocating that you sell them. Here's what I'm trying to say. The dreams are telling me over and over and over again for 2 years now, and these are very reliable dreams, most of which do not involve Obama, by the way. What they're saying is you're going to see something happen that's going to look like the most terrifying event financially and in the world that you've ever seen. But almost as soon as it's happened, or it appears to be happening, things are going to turn out much better than you ever imagined. So if your money temporarily seems to have been turned to worthless paper, just hang on. Don't get rid of it. Don't give it up, because when this thing finally goes through, you're going to have a much, much healthier financial system on the other end, and your money will actually be worth a lot more than it was before. So the reason why I'm doing this, the reason why my focus is so single-mindedly on this one thing, is because it's going to scare the living crap out of you when it happens, if you don't know why it's happening. Okay?
Right.
In order for this Illuminati to be defeated, in order for the New World Order to be gutted and exposed and tried for treason on the world stage, however it comes about, you're going to need some pretty frickin' awful stuff. They're not just going to suddenly show up at the front door of the courthouse and say, okay, yeah, we admit it, we've been screwing you guys for 200 years, and sure, we'll go to trial now. That's not how the game is played. The only way that things this big are going to happen is when really big things happen to make them become an issue. The average person is going to continue to eat, potato chips and drive to football games and drink beer if they don't know anything else, And in order to get those folks, the heartland, awakened to what's really going on, it's going to have to be pretty frickin' brutal. And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a war. We're dealing with a war that is getting really bloody now. And it's a war in which the wounded party is on the run, and they're the wounded lion that's going out in a blaze of glory and slashing at whoever they can. But I do say, again and again, it's going to work out. It's being managed and guided by higher forces, and we're getting an ever-increasing amount of whistleblower testimony now saying that disclosure will result in the aftermath of these things. So look, disclosure is not just the president gets on TV one day and sits you down around the fire and says, okay, guys, we got all this crazy stuff, and we got all this technology, and there's all these human beings out there from various planets, and they're all helping us. Happy birthday. Now you know the truth. That's not the way it goes. The reason why the November 27th deadline was chosen was because they had assumed, based on the fact that it was August 27th, that the Rockefeller faction was supposed to be functionally bankrupt, that we would have been in the midst of this horrifying economic spiral by that time. But events have changed. Events have changed in a way that has forestalled this thing. But again, whatever this thing is, remember, the reason why we have so much economic trouble right now is because you have had this parasite in the system that is betting on our money at 1,000 to 1, meaning that for every legitimate dollar that we have, they're claiming that they have $1,000. So it's it's like, just if that system alone were knocked out, your money would ultimately be worth $1,000. It would be like having $1,000 for every $1, basically. And you have to understand that once this chicanery is taken out of the system, everybody will be able to live like a millionaire. I mean, that's absolutely a fact. If free energy is released, if these other technologies are released, you're going to have a monumental shift in the world, and it will happen. This is really like the critical time. This is the summit that we've finally gotten to after all this mountain climbing and all the hardship and all the struggle that we've gotten to get up to this point. And we're just about now to get up to the point where you can actually see the whole lay of the land and have this beautiful view. But the top of the mountain is the steepest part, and that's the part we're climbing through right now. And so there's rocks falling, and you might tumble a little bit, but we're going to get through this. And so, again, the reason why I'm obsessing on this stuff and why I keep talking about this is because I want you to know about it before it happens, so that when it does happen, that you can be one of the people out there on the internet who is actually spreading hope rather than spreading fear.
And what could be more spiritual than that?
Exactly. We're going to, you have to understand, in the greater sense, we're dealing with a frequency war. We're dealing with a battle between love and fear. And there really is no battle in the greater sense, as you know from the Course. But within the illusion of this physical world that we're living in, there does appear to be negativity and fear and disaster. And that battle is something that is actually allowed to happen. It's one of the things that people who are not as well-versed in truly evolved metaphysics have a really difficult time understanding. That the universe allows suffering and sorrow and pain and negativity to occur up to a certain point. Because what's really going on is that you have this system where the evolution of consciousness is being promoted by what happens. If you have negativity that happens, it's not just a horrible thing that has no other value. I'm sorry. I have somebody at my door, so if you can give me just 1 second, I got to go take care of this.
Okay.
Okay, hold on.
Basically, what I understand David is talking about with the duality of positive and negative happening in the illusion that we call third dimension. We all have free will, and as far as expansion of consciousness is concerned, things that happen that are quote-unquote negative.
Okay, very sorry about that.
I was just doing a little talk on positive and negative, David. Basically, you had said it helps to expand the consciousness, and that's true in the sense that negative events do spur your expansion of consciousness because we have free will to choose better.
Absolutely correct. Negative events do so many things. I mean, imagine if you live in a world where there's all this injustice, but you never are aware of it. And so therefore, you can live in this basically narcissistic bubble where there's nobody out there but you. And so one of the really interesting things, there's one of the 2012 quotes out of the Law of One that I was using in my presentation in San Francisco this past weekend, is when they were talking about the seeming distresses and seeming disasters within your illusion that are happening at this time that will cause more people to seek the reason for the apparent malfunctioning rhythms of their planet. So this includes earth changes, this includes tsunamis, tidal waves, hurricanes, volcanoes, the whole gamut of earth changes. It includes the Illuminati, secret government politics. It includes children starving in these other countries. These things are not just terrible things that are happening. If you're one of the people who says, oh my God, that's terrible, then guess what? Now you're inspired to want to do something to help the planet. But the wisdom behind that is that what really has happened is that you now are more conscious. You're now saying, wow, there's other people out there besides me, and even though my life is pretty good and I live in an affluent Western country, these people are really hurting, and I ought to do something. I ought to do something to help them. Now, there's feelings of powerlessness that come up, and that's also part of the process. That's also part of the journey that we have to go through. But again, these guys, these Illuminati folks, have been allowed to be here. They are allowed to be here, but they make plans that are much, much more vast in scope of damage than anything that they're ever allowed to do. They don't realize the extent to which they are being manicured and stage managed by these higher forces that I call the management ETs. But the management forces do not allow these guys to do what they're planning. Now, I'll give you a really great example. You go back to Peter David Beater's website, and he's talking about the 1970s. We know that what happened in the aftermath of